Coming up on today's show.
If you start having so many issues where it feels like it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be.
I'm only holding on to something in my head because I'm lonely. I never ever meant to hurt you, but it doesn't make it any less true.
Welcome to episode 118 of the Oklahoma Real Estate Show. On today's show, it's tips you need to know about new flips in Oklahoma City. I talk with Stephanie Parr, a realtor and investor here, about her latest flip. It kind of was a little bit of a disaster there, but we have some great takeaways for you on what to do and what to not do as we go into 2023 flipping your home.
Thank you so much, Landon, for having me. I'm excited to tell your audience just kind of everything about the flip, what we learned, what we would do again, what we wouldn't do again. So yeah, I'm an open book when it comes to that. I feel like there's always a lot to learn from other people, and so definitely ask me all the questions.
Excellent. So the time frame on this thing is kind of wonky. Like it does seem like it's a little bit longer than usual, and I want to get your thoughts on what happened there. So the original list date of the property you acquired was listed in MLS August 14th of 2021, and it spent 119 days on the market. I think it was at $340,000 was the initial price. You identified that property, that it had a lot of potential to be able to buy it, add value to the property, and then sell the property. So you ended up getting it under contract at $295 and take it from there.
Yeah. So we had recently done another flip just down the street from this, within really a couple blocks. So we did one on 31st Street, and it was just a couple blocks over. And it was very similar architecture style, year built. It also had the detached garage apartment, which is very popular. As soon as I saw this one on MLS, I told my husband, who is also my business partner, we do everything together in that aspect. I said, I think this is our next flip. And we had to go see it. We are very cautious about when we purchase a home, making sure that we take our time to purchase the right one. So we had been looking, and I don't know how I hadn't seen this one yet. I think maybe I was looking in the lower price point, because typically when we're looking for flips, we're looking, sub 200 to acquire it. And so this one was over that, but it had, based on the numbers that I was very familiar with, being that we were just a couple streets over, I was like, oh, wow, this has a lot of potential based on the numbers. So, and it also backed up to a park. It backed up to Memorial Park, which is very desirable. Most people, don't want neighbors behind them. And those typically, parks add a lot of value to a property. So we went to go look at it. It was like, yes, this is it. We had the vision when we walked in. We walked into what was the kitchen and what was the dining room. And I looked over, and my husband said, I already know what you're going to say. He's like, I need to call the plumber, don't I? Because he already knew I was going to want to move the kitchen from the current location to the adjacent room. Because if you look at the pictures on MLS, the kitchen, it's huge. It's like a huge wraparound kitchen with all the windows. And before, it was a very, very small space for the size of home, because yet again, the main home was 2,400 square feet. I was like, this is going to be a family home. Like, this kitchen is not going to suffice for the modern family. So I was like, we got to do something about this. So yeah, we negotiated for several days actually with the sellers, because they were really stuck on on their price point as well. which I understand. You always want to get the most for your home, and we did buy it in the height of the market.
I
So
was going to say,
we bought it.
certainly helped. It helped them, at that time.
Exactly. But also with it being 5 days on market, we saw the opportunity of, well, maybe they're just wanting to let it go at this point. So we were able to get it down to $295. And then this is where the real fun starts. So we had used a lender that we worked with several times prior to, and on a flip, usually we can close in about 2 weeks. It's almost the same as a cash buy. It's so they fund within several days after having an appraisal come in. Well, and I should also, this is a very important aspect, the listing agent of the home was also an appraiser. So she understood, the ARV side. Obviously, she couldn't do the appraisal because it would have been a conflict of interest, but she understood the issues that we were going through because she knew how busy appraisers were in the height of that market. However, I never want to say, oh, it's this one thing that maybe if this would have happened this way, everything else would have worked out. That's not a good way to look at a project. It's the overall, and there's lots of contributing factors that go into the success of the overall project. But the timeline, if everything had gone right with that initial appraisal, would have cut out at least 3 months of reno time, because we would have been able to start on it sooner, start on at the very beginning of the year, and list it over the summer before the rates went up, doubled almost overnight. So when we got the appraisal, the first one, by the time we were done with, when we went to go close, there were 4 appraisers that had touched the file. And I have never seen anything like it. The listing agent had never seen anything like it. The first one probably was the hardest thing because, as you know, we acquired it at $295. Well, this appraiser came in and gave it an ARV value of $265 after we had factored putting in over $100,000 into it, right? And so we were looking at this appraisal, and I was like, these are not even rented comps that he's used for this house. I have this in my notes. He showed up at the wrong house initially to do the appraisal. He didn't. I think he was a little frustrated, but I mean, he had the right address. He just showed up at the wrong house. No. He also did not go through the proper channel to schedule the appraisal. So he called me as the buyer instead of the listing agent, which is, 101, a no-no, like you call the listing agent. And he called only, I want to say, an hour and a half before he going to go out and do the appraisal. So neither of us had time to meet him on site, even if it was her or me, to go through the reno budget or anything like that. So he sent it in. Obviously, the ARV value was under the contract price. So we were saying we're going to put $100,000 into it at $295, but he valued it at $265. And the lender that we were using at that point was like, well, because they're out of state, and they're like, well, we have this licensed appraiser saying it's worth only this. There's really not much else we can do. So I was like, well, I know that that's not true because we literally just sold one a block away. Right. And we were comping it, way above that. So we actually ended up switching lenders who promised a much shorter turnaround time. They were like, we can close this in 10 days.
So appraisal delays, the total delay was how many? What was the time between getting under contract and closing?
75 days.
But you got the ARV, and it's showing you're going to buy at $295. It's going to be worth $580 when you're done, which is a $290,000 split.
Yeah.
Or $285,000 split. You're thinking the rehab is going to cost $100, you said?
Yeah, approximately $100. I think obviously when you get in there and sometimes you look at things and you might go over budget on something or under budget on another, it's, we try to stick as close to the budget as possible. But my husband, he does all of the finished trim carpentry. And so that saves us a lot of money where we're not having to pay a cabinet shop. We're not having to pay a finished trim carpenter. He does a lot of the demo himself. We contract out everything that needs to be permitted, and that requires a license to do the job. And also, he doesn't like to do tiles, so we hire that out too.
Yeah, we've all got our things we like to do and not do. I hate painting. That's
Yeah. So does he. He said, I don't like to paint and I don't like to tile, but I'll do everything else.
Yeah, makes sense. So you start the renovation in February, I'm assuming.
Yeah, as soon as we close on it.
Okay, as soon as you closed, you began the renovation. How long does that take?
So we started as soon as we closed on it. We finished in September. So by the end of it was I think we listed it September 23rd, and the last week of that is staging the property and getting it ready. So we had it on the market, and truthfully, the renovation of the house was very smooth. There weren't any hiccups during the project where it's oh, we didn't know that, or you know what I mean? It was very straightforward. But it was crazy. Once we got it under contract, it was that's where almost the issue started coming back in, because it was a very hard home to buy almost. And then it was a very, very hard home to sell. But the reno was very easy.
Which was a 7-month process. Did I hear that right?
6.5 months. Yeah, close to 7. Yeah.
What was the total renovation cost? What did that end up being?
110 into it.
What percentage of the renovation do you feel like you guys did yourself?
Oh, 40% was done. Yeah, because we hire out all the electric, all the plumbing, the tile and the paint, the roof. My husband does the demo, and we do all the planning, design, landscaping, cleanup, any of those things. So I'd say probably 40% is what we do.
So if somebody had to do that same job remotely, you would think that it would be 40% higher. Would you say that would be accurate? It would be maybe more 150, 160?
Oh, at least, because demo, unless you just hire demo companies, they're actually quite expensive if you actually price them out. And then finished trim work and cabinetry, that is a large ticket item, especially for the amount that we did. So yes, it definitely saved us a lot doing it ourselves.
Okay, so
and that's how we were.
110 renovation is what you guys spent, but maybe someone who was out of state would have spent probably 150, 160.
Yeah.
We get on the market in September. Talk to us about that. You decide to list at the ARV appraisal that you got before, correct?
Yes. And we had several showings on it.
580, but those that missed that part. So you
right.
came on the market at 580.
We had, we listed it in September. We got an offer pretty soon after we listed it, and it was a cash buyer. So we were excited about that. It went through inspections, but I feel like as the market shifted, and rates went up, buyers became, obviously your buyer pool is less whenever the rates double overnight. Almost. So when we purchased it, rates were in the low 3s for conventional FHA. And when we listed it, they were mid 7s. So that cuts out a huge portion of your buyers because they can almost afford half of what they were previously able to afford.
Right.
And I also think at that price point, buyers become a lot more picky about what they are getting in a house, rightfully so. I understand that, buying a home at that price. And so there were, I think in hindsight, there were things that we should have done on the house that we did not do because we did not have to do them previously on other homes. So I think we should have replaced the HVAC. The heater was older. And that was something that came up several times. Buyer, it was feedback that we kept getting. And at that point, we were like, well, it's kind of too late to do that. We are finishing the project's listed. So we had that feedback. I'm trying to think. The house had previously had some foundation work done to it because it had a full unfinished basement. And so us being very well versed in older historic homes, we understand that the house is over 100 years old. There's probably been settlement over those years. Now, does that mean that the house is still moving and that the house is going to cave in? No, it doesn't. It just means that the house has had movement over the last 120 years.
Sure.
And we had a foundation company come in, say everything looks great. Like I think under the porch, there were some peers that they were like, well, technically an inspector might call that out if they saw it. It's not really a structural issue. So you're okay with it. And so we were like, okay, awesome. Like we have a foundation company who is here telling us that it doesn't need work and that everything was done properly, like for the main portion of the house. However, they can see cracks down in the basement that were there previously. And so I think maybe not necessarily like hiding those by any means, but definitely making them look more aesthetically pleasing to where it's not going to draw a buyer's attention to those things and think, oh, there's something wrong with this. Because a lot of people were like, does it have foundation problems? Why was it on the market?
Okay.
So
Well, with it being after it's now closed in escrow, we can talk about the dirty details if you're okay with it. So you got a lower offer, all cash offer at the beginning for how much lower than the 580?
So we contracted at 535.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So they came out of the gate saying, as is 535. How many days on market were you at that point?
I want to say it was maybe 15.
Okay. So you'd gotten past the first 2 weeks, no offers, decent amount of showings?
Yeah, we had steady showings, a lot of interest on it. We had great feedback on the design. I mean, like there wasn't really anything.
But the news is scary at that point back in September. Everybody's thinking, anything could have happened at that point. Stocks are plummeting. So you guys decide, and at that point, you're still, you had $285,000 in gap between the acquisition and the ARV selling price. You'd spent $110 in there. So I'm estimating, what is that? $150,000 at closing.
Yeah.
So then you take the low offer, that puts $100,000 in your pocket at that point, minus closing cost.
Right.
So you're walking away with $90,000, get the deal over with in a very, turbulent time period. So you decide to take that. The buyer comes back and starts picking you over energy efficiency stuff.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yep. And that was very frustrating because, and I will say too, they used every single day that they could in their inspection period. And I think as a seller and also just, agent to agent, I think, yes, you have those days that you have to negotiate. But if you can communicate quickly and try to do things quickly, everyone's time is money in those situations. And so it was very frustrating for us because we were just down to the wire on every inspection period, TRR negotiation period, whenever there really wasn't supposed to be a TRR negotiation period because it was an as-is purchase.
Right.
And so it just kind of got, the details started getting fuzzy. As far as I say fuzzy, it just kind of got where it was just a lot of back and forth and, no, we're not doing this. This is what you're going to pay. This is not even part of an inspection report. This is just your preference on the home. And we would be willing to do it after we closed, but we're not going to do, $60,000 worth of work on the house prior to you closing on it. We could do a contract outside of, like a general contractor's agreement outside of closing, and we'd be more than happy to take care of, these items for you. So at the end of the day, we were supposed to close. I remember it was a Tuesday. We were supposed to close, I believe, at 2:00, and the buyers backed out. We got a release of contract the morning of. So I didn't even have a phone call on that. It was just, I had a release of contract in my inbox. So that was just very frustrating and disheartening at that point because we had, in our opinion, done everything we could to move the sale forward. And I think that's only happened to me one other time when I worked for a builder where we had a contract fall through the day of closing, and it was just, during the pandemic. and for other reasons. So
At the day of closing, what had you negotiated at that point? That you just reduced the price even further, or what did you?
No,
where were you guys at closing?
we were going to close it out at the higher sales price at the 580, and we had the items listed in the TRR of what were going to be done to the home,
Which was about $60,000 in concessions.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
So
Which put you back to there. So you basically said, I'm going to put you back to, what was that? The 535 initial offer, raise us back to the 580 where we should be, and then we'll do all these repairs.
right.
Interesting.
And so, and initially they were like fine with closing and us going, because that's not uncommon to have some things done after closing if you can't fit it within the time frame. But we, of course, were not going to front all the money and do all those things prior to closing. Title didn't want to escrow the funds. So it was like, really, this is the only way that we're going to do it outside of closing at the original 535 and just doing those things for you after closing with a general contractor's agreement. So, it fell through the morning of closing and it was very frustrating, but we were like, hey, it wasn't meant to be. We'll put it back on the market.
So that buyer bounces the day of closing and you're back on the market now. What did you do next?
So we just moved forward. We had already done a lot of the things preemptively, like the smaller items on the TRR that we're like, well, that might come up in another inspection. So we knocked all of those out. And believe it or not, this is also the learning part here. So they wanted a new sewer line put in, and we had already had our, granted, there were no cracks in the sewer line or anything. This
is the second buyer now.
This is actually still the first one. So,
okay.
One of the things that they wanted was a new sewer line on the property. They had a sewer scope, no big deal. There was, with the basement, the sewer line was almost 15 feet down. So there was a huge drop in the sewer line. Our plumber even said this will never cause a backup issue because the bellying of the water, which is a term for holding some water, was at the main connection, which was so far away from the home. He said, if you haven't had any issues with this, there's no need to really replace it. But that was something that they wanted to do. So we got on his schedule to have it done. And we were like, there was a miscommunication between my husband and him on when to start. So the day of closing, I drove up to the house, or the day that we were supposed to close, and the yard is dug up. And I just,
oh no.
I looked at my husband and he looked at me, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me, because we were still in limbo at that point of if we were actually going to close on it that day. And here we are with the yard totally dug up for, really, in our opinion, a repair that we could have spent that money elsewhere where it was really needed.
Okay.
So yeah. So extra line item added onto the budget. So again, a learning curve on that, or a learning lesson on that, was make sure that you very clearly communicate to the plumber what day that you want to start the work like that, instead of just leaving it, or we can probably start next week,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So my gosh. So at that point you decided to proceed with the repair?
Yeah, I mean, the sewer line was, at that point, the yard was dug up, the hole was there. All that they had to do was put in the pipe and backfill it. So it's like, well, no need to stop now. This will at least be a selling point that it has a brand new sewer line.
Sure.
So we put it back on the market.
This is October of 2022 now. Is that right? Does that sound about right?
This is going into November. It was like the very 1st of November.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're approaching Christmas. It's cold, starting to get cold outside. You've got the sewer line replaced, but the dirt is probably, all mounded up in the backyard now. And you now are back on the market, and you list at what price? What did you decide to list again?
So I'm trying to think if we kept it at the 580 and then dropped it again, or dropped it. I would have to look at what we did, because I think it was like 569, I want to say, without having MLS pulled up. We obviously did sell a price reduction, so I don't remember the exact increments that we went in, but we dropped it a little bit at first just to kind of get some more attention on it. And again, the 580, in my opinion, was a high price. I will admit that. I was shocked that the appraisal came in that high. But if you have an appraisal, I was like, well, let's try it. Why not? We want to get the most that we can. So we started dropping the price and realistically thinking, we would continue to get buyers. Well, we did get another buyer. We went under contract on Christmas Eve. The agent was great to work with. Good rapport there. The buyers were out of state, and they had looked at the home one time, and they looked at it when it was very, very cold. It was like during that cold spell that we had where, it was like single digit temperature. So it was, they were in the home during one of the coldest times of the year. Well, when they did their inspections, the inspector came back and suggested that basically the house's windows were subpar for the house because of energy efficiency. Well, yet again, an appraiser's standpoint for the value of the house does not add value for new windows. They don't add value for even new HVAC. They don't add value for new water heaters. Those are all just, oh my gosh, what am I trying to say there? Those are all part of home maintenance. And so from a value standpoint, those things don't necessarily add value to a home. They just might entice a buyer to look at that property because it has all those new features. So we went under contract, and then they decided they wanted a price reduction because they wanted to rip out all the walls, put in new insulation, put in new windows, and we had the home already mostly rewired, everything brought up to code, everything permitted. Well, the inspector found a knob and tube wire coming from the breaker box, but it wasn't powering anything. It was just cut off.
This is the buyer's home inspector, not the city inspector. Okay.
Right. This is the second buyer's home inspector.
Okay. Second buyer's inspection. And you, from what I'm looking at on the MLS, you were listed at that point at 500. Does that ring a bell? You were listed at 500 going into Christmas, and then you got under contract.
No, we were listed, I want to say, at 550 at that point.
Okay.
It was somewhere in that range. It was higher.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the inspector points out tube and wiring. I'm guessing this deal busted then in December.
It did.
Oh gosh. Oh, buyer number 2 bust. So okay. Wow, this is getting juicy. Okay. All right. So buyer number 2, inspector's talking about tube and wiring. They're upset with the windows. They're upset with the insulation. What happens next?
Well, here's the thing is we didn't get the house because we hadn't done that on any of the other ones yet again in the same neighborhood, never had any issues with it. And like, well, it's not necessary. Like the house it stays warm in the winter and cool in the summer. There's not a need for it. And so they wanted a whole lot more off of the asked price. They asked us to, they wanted to extend the inspection period until February. So it just started becoming unreasonable asks, in our opinion.
Sure.
From a buyer's standpoint and a seller's standpoint, I'm like, well, we're not going to hold the house off the market for a 60-day inspection period. And then they wanted.
And that was these folks are from California. Was that an out-of-state buyer from California?
The second ones were from Texas.
At that point, they kept asking for extension. You guys are watching the uncertainty in the market, saying this has gotten ridiculous, and you eventually declined their extension. Is that?
Yeah. It was just they agreed. We're like, this is not going to work. We put the house off the market for 2 months.
So you decided to go back on the market?
Yeah. So we put it back on the market as soon as that fell through, and that was right around Christmas time. I think it was just right after Christmas when we relisted it, and we had a lot of interest because at that point, I want to say we're like, we just need to sell the property. Like it's were paying interest on it. The loan was going to be due in March. The 1st of March was whenever that loan matured. And we're like, we don't want to hold on to the property.
Okay. Yeah. Your audio kind of cut out there for a second. So you didn't want to Airbnb it. So you decided to go back on the market.
Yeah. And because we had looked at doing a cash out refinance, and we would have been able to, recoup that money and at least start another project in the meantime. But it just, I'm very much so a gut feeling person. And I was like, I just don't think this is the right one for us to hold on to. And it's a large home. It would have been a large mortgage. I was like, I don't think that's the right way for us to go. So we just need to sell it. And so that's exactly, thankfully the cards fell in place, and that's exactly what happened. The buyers did not have a realtor on the third set of buyers. And so they went through me. It was a very smooth transaction. They were able to close quickly. We did end up selling a lot less than what we intended to do. But in the end, we saved on agent commission because we didn't have to pay another agent. And I was able to see both sides of the transaction, and they were very great to work with. So,
and I see that there was an FHA offer, was it? There was an FHA loan. Okay.
Yes.
Which you guys were prepared for that because, I mean, you guys were the renovators on it. You knew what you were kind of facing. And,
yes.
So an FHA, because an FHA is a very, a little bit more stringent appraisal process, a little bit more, eyes open there. Did you have any issues with the FHA appraisal on that?
So not with the value of the home. He actually valued it kind of where I had initially.
Which
so
was what?
I was comping around 500.
Which is where you came back on the market for your third, when you got the third buyer, you came back on the market at your initial, what you had initially thought it was going to be worth, $499.
Yes.
You got under contract with that buyer, and then there were some repair requests or things because you didn't ended up selling it $499. You sold for lower. Tell me how that happened.
Well, so we actually had contracted for less because they had called me and they were like, hey, we've had our eye on your house. It's a little out of our budget, but would you be willing to negotiate on the list price? They knew we had already gone down quite a bit on it. And so at that point, I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, we had a ton of showings as soon as I dropped it under 500. I mean, I want to say we had 20 showings within a week and a half. Like, we had a ton, but we didn't have any offers on it. And so we were just very stumped as to like, why have we not received any offers? And the feedback was like, well, they loved the home, didn't love the area, or just not the right thing for them, because it really was an up and coming area. There were a few homes redone on that same block, but not all the homes were redone. And I think at that price point too, buyers are like, well, I want my home to look like all the other homes in the neighborhood if I'm over that price point. So
sure.
Yeah. You never want to be the...
So you're 81 days on the market. You receive a phone call from a buyer without an agent that says it's above our price point, but we'd like to what? They said, we'd like to offer what? What did they offer?
They ended up offering we ended at $463. So they went under contract at $463. That's what we closed it out at. There weren't any...
That's an unusual number. That sounds precise. Was that 463? Where did they come up with that number?
They said that's just what they were able to be approved for.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Oh, max approval rate. Excellent.
So he was like,
yeah.
So I didn't really ask questions on that. I was like, okay, well, that's the highest you can go. This is kind of where we stand. And so I was like, if we're going to, obviously we're saving on agent commission because they are working through me. Like, if you guys are not going to ask for any repairs, which I had shared the inspection report with them, so they were able to see everything about the house, very transparent through everything. And they were like, yeah, none of this scares us. We're going to move forward with it. So we didn't do any repairs on, and there really wasn't much on there. It was just very, very small stuff at that point. We did end up taking out that knob and tube wire. With your very yeah, I would like, but for the last deal, but
Why not?
Anything in the house, like it was just there. It was just it just needed to be removed. We ended up closing, but the appraiser did find it was two things on the thing that on his report that were subject to repairs, and that it's funny because I have never had a consistent appraiser pick out the same things on a house. I've never had like the same things being called out. So, again, learning curve. There was a little bit of sheetrock in the garage that had been taken down where like the water heater was, where they did some replumbing. They wanted that to be put back on. And then it was like a step that had like a loose, it was like a part of the step was loose going off of the porch. And so now here's what's crazy is whenever I met the appraiser, I said, if we do these, if my husband can come out here and get these done today, how soon can you come back out and do the pictures to return in the report? He said, well, he said, truthfully, he said the bank can probably just look past these since he said a bank can deem any of these items cosmetic and they can close without having any of these requirements done. And so he's like, don't do any of them until you hear back from the bank because they may just dismiss them, which I had never heard before. And so we were kind of fed misinformation from the appraiser at that point, saying that we didn't need to do them. And so that we lost a few days on that too. But in the end, everything got done and we closed. So
Excellent.
Yeah.
That was a big closing day. You were probably like nervous up until the check was in your hand, I bet.
yeah, well, and it was the mail out closing because they had to travel too. And so that added, just an extra step. And so it was like we closed on Friday, funded on Monday, but yeah.
So in closing, you've done a great job with kind of taking us through that. What are the top three things? If you had to narrow it down to the top three big lessons learned in this flip, what would they be?
The first thing is if you start having so many issues where it feels like it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. And I kind of mentioned I'm a very much so a gut feeling person. And when we started having all those issues with the appraiser, the appraisals, just on the purchase of it, deep down, I was like, maybe this is a sign this is not the right house for us. Maybe we should just move on. We have never had issues like this purchasing. It shouldn't be this hard. So that was one of them. The second one was buyers at that price point, especially in the 500 and over range, they're going to want all new mechanicals. They're going to want new windows, all those things that are energy efficient. They care about and they care a lot about. Definitely focusing on mechanicals of the house versus just cosmetics is going to pay off because there's not going to be anything for an inspector to point out. And then third would be price it aggressively rather than on the high side, because then you run into the pitfalls of overpricing. So I think if we were originally priced where I had initially comped it with the numbers that we were familiar with, I think it would have sold very, very, very fast.
Excellent. And what did you end up netting on the deal, if you don't mind sharing?
I would rather not disclose that information. And also I haven't truly added everything up. There are still some lingering invoices that I have not added to my spreadsheet. But we didn't lose money. We definitely didn't make as much as we wanted to. So
Gotcha. And so in hindsight, if you think if you were to do it over again, because of the appraisal bouncing at the initial acquisition, you might just walk away from the deal altogether. But even if you did go through with it, you might ignore the fact that this ARV appraisal was just way higher than what you as a professional had thought, and maybe even split the difference or just listed at what you had before. And you think that would have been more of a slam dunk, if you will.
Yeah, they had used comps that were from Crown Heights, and obviously Military Park, Central Park is not a historical district. And so you have to adjust on those whenever you are comping, even finishes on those, you have to adjust for.
Right. Moving across the street. Sure.
Right.
Sure. Who's there? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, the historical district too has the tax incentives on the renovations when you're doing a huge project. You know, they've got that. Well, this has been fantastic today. Thanks for sharing with me. This is exactly the kind of talk that I wish we could do more of. So thanks for coming on the show and sharing your experience flipping this house. Now, do you plan on doing another one, or can we expect to see another one coming from you soon?
Yes, we will be doing flips. We might start shifting more towards rentals at this point because of the rates. I think as the market has kind of slowed, it's a really good time to buy and hold because you're able to buy more aggressively with less competition, and that's where you want to be when you're buying. So we might start. Instead of doing a flip, I think we might start holding on to those smaller properties. And I think that's where our focus is going to be on just a little bit lower price point unless rates change drastically.
Sure. So kind of more thinking towards retirement kind of thing, passive income coming in. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. And we also remodel for other families as well. So we do both. And so it's like if we find a great house that we feel like there's a great profit margin on, obviously we'll jump on it. But yet again, we want to make sure it's the right one.
If someone wants to get a hold of you for your remodeling skills, how would they get a hold of you?
They can, we have an Instagram page and a Facebook page that has our contact info on there, or they can shoot me a message through Facebook. Obviously I'm just Stephanie Parr on Facebook, and it'll say Chamberlain Realty and London Lee Homes, so they can message me through there too.
And what's your handle on Instagram?
It's just at London Lee Homes.
London Lee Homes. All right.
Yep.
Well, thanks for coming on the show, Stephanie. You have a good rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Landon. You too.
Wow, so many lessons learned there on today's episode. I hope you were able to take away some good stuff there. Be encouraged though, the more we can communicate with each other, the better these flips get, the more we can avoid these huge pitfalls. And in Oklahoma County, there's a lot of flipping to be done. There's estimated 56,000 properties that are sitting vacant right now in Oklahoma County, waiting for someone like you to flip them. If you're ready to get started on your flip, why don't you start the conversation with me? Visit oklahomarealestateshow.com. I would love to talk to you about what inventory we have available, get your thoughts, what your passions are, so we can connect a property with you and we can list on the market and you can get started on your flip in 2023. Thanks for watching this episode.